Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Ben and I'm a self-taught web developer who went from zero to paid full stack in about 8 months via the Odin project. And in today's video, I wanted to talk about a question I got on what was my path to web development? What was my story? How did I get into it? So I'm going to share some details on that today. Before I do that, please do like, subscribe, and make a comment if you find anything interesting or have any questions. It really does help out the channel. And lastly, sorry if I sound or look a little off today. Yet another bug came from my son in his daycare where they just seem to be manufacturing them on a monthly basis, and it ravaged our household yet again. So just getting over that one. Fun times. Okay, let's jump into this graphic here. I think it will help me tell this story a little clearer. The x-axis here goes all the way back for 2002 up to today at 2024. Just because I want to kind of build a whole picture of my background and how I eventually became a Ruby on Rails developer. So back in 2002, when I was a little teenager, I was working in a computer store. I only did this for a couple of months. It was a friend or like a business associate of my dad's, and he needed someone to help him out, and I didn't get paid. It was just kind of a volunteer basis just to learn, first job kind of thing. And I was building computers, Windows computers. So people would come in. This was kind of early days on the internet still. It wasn't in every house, that's for sure. People would say, I need a Windows machine just to get up and running on the internet and basic word processing and all that kind of stuff. So I would build the machine to spec, install Windows, get it up and running, and do some basic debugging, troubleshooting on the install. There was obviously a tech there who had a lot more knowledge than me, who guided me. But that was kind of my first introduction into, I guess, IT, more IT than computer science. Nothing significant on programming or anything like that, but that was it. And then around 2000 as well, we had an internet and computer in our house. We were one of the first in my school or not the first in my school, but of my friends, I was one of the first to have the internet. So, I spent a lot of time on the internet, playing around, learning stuff, building small websites, GeoCities, and then in school did a tiny bit of HTML, but nothing significant. Honestly, anything I'd learned in HTML, most of the tags were like deprecated by the time I started learning web development again, like the marquee tag, which was the only tag I remembered. That makes something scroll across the screen like this in a really cheesy manner. It changed so much and I just knew nothing. So it really wasn't that relevant. Okay, next. When I got a little bit older in university age, I decided to get a degree in geography. So I have a Bachelor of Science in geography. And I was kind of stuck with making a decision of what do you want to do when you're older? It's the toughest question to answer when you're 18, to figure out what path am I going to take that I'm going to want to do for the rest of my life. I think honestly, it's a ridiculous question to ask an 18-year-old in most cases, right? Some people really do know what they want to do. I was really interested in techie stuff, but I just didn't align with the typical computer science student back in 2005, 2006 era. It just wasn't me. I really didn't like math in school. I was good at science and statistics. I just didn't see the point of studying math because it was not applicable. I'm a very goal-driven person, so to me, math was a waste of time. It was not achieving any goals for me. And a computer science degree was very math-heavy, calculus-heavy, and very into the theory side of things. It wasn't... you weren't able to just go and build stuff quickly that was practical, right? And that's what excites me. So I didn't go into computer science. Wasn't interested. I was interested in the natural world. I always loved being outside and going outdoors and kind of studying the land and that kind of stuff. So that's why I did my Bachelor of Science in Geography. I finished that. Couldn't really find much work that I really wanted to do. With a Bachelor's in Geography, it's a very sort of generalist degree. So I went back to school and I got my Master's of Science. And I got this from McGill University in Canada, which is one of Canada's top universities. So I think it looks very good on paper to have a Master's of Science from McGill. And that was in water resources management specifically. And that did help me land my first job in this career. So I spent 10 years in another career before web development, and this was in water resources management. And I'm just going to take a quick side shoot here. And I have been asked in the past, do you have a degree? Yes, I have 2 degrees. I have a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science. I think that does look good on paper, regardless of where you're applying to. It is not relevant to computer science, web development whatsoever. It has nothing to do with any kind of engineering or software engineering. But it does show on paper that you have formal education. You are able to show up somewhere regularly enough, write assignments, pass them, write tests, pass them, and get a degree. Okay, that does mean a lot on paper, I think. Now, it doesn't mean everything, especially in the context of computer science. It really doesn't mean much other than you can show up and do some work. Okay, there are other ways to fulfill that as well. And I think having a Master's of Science just shows that you're also eager to learn and progress and grow a little bit further. It's a higher level of education. Chances are you're probably not a dummy if you've got a Master's of Science. Apologies, there's that person with a really loud exhaust again. They keep driving by my videos. Okay, so that's just a quick aside. Do degrees help? Unrelated degrees help you get a job in web development? I honestly am not sure. My opinion is, I think they don't hurt necessarily. How much they help, I couldn't tell you. But I do think if you had someone who has a master's degree from a good university in an unrelated field, and you have another candidate who has no formal education, and they are both comparable in their technical skill set, a hiring manager is probably going to go with the person with the degree. And I don't know why, but I think it's just because it shows a high level of education. And if you were ever asked why did you choose X instead of Y, then you have justification. I think it would be harder to choose Y instead of X if Y didn't have the education. And I'm not sure if I'm right here or wrong. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on whether or not you think unrelated degrees will help you get a job in tech. But that's my thoughts on it. I think they can't hurt, at least, right? For the reasons that I mentioned. Okay, back to my timeline here. So, end of 2012, or partway through 2012 rather, I got my master's degree and I started working in water management. And I started working in a consulting firm. And if you can think around where your water comes from, there's lots of governments or organizations that manage a water system that provides water to people. And these entities need help managing that water. So I worked in a consulting firm for 2 years that was providing services to entities like governments all across Canada do that. And in this role, I actually got kind of a taste of what computer science looks like and feels like. Because one of the founders of this business, he is a CSC grad, software engineer. And he was the expert in taking masses of data. So you can imagine every house that's supplied water by a government system, let's say, they have a water meter on their home, and that collects data on how much water they use. And then you can imagine there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of water users. That becomes a massive data set. We were receiving these massive data sets and having to cleanse them and analyze them for stories, right? To tell us information about where a government might be able to make more efficiencies in their water use. So this software engineer, who was the founder of the company or co-founder of the company, he built a pretty complex Excel, no less, Excel-based set of worksheets, because like a mini application that was used to analyze, cleanse all of this data to tell stories. And I became, my job was to learn and understand how this was working, and then take the data, cleanse it, and start building and telling stories with that data. So it was a lot of Excel functions and a lot of just thinking through problems the same way that you would in software engineering. I had no idea at the time, but it's only looking back on it that I realized that there was a lot of similarities in that role. So I did that job for 2 years, and I wanted to change. I wanted something else, something a little different. Namely, I'd heard government was good. I heard that they pay more, it's more secure, you get lots of time off, all these nice sounding things. So I decided to go try and get a job in government. And I also knew that getting into government was tough, but once you're in, it's easier to find the jobs that you want. So I was actually not picky on my first job in getting into government. And I got a job in tech support, of all things, doing tier 1 tech support for custom-built applications for the Natural Resources Ministry. So this was kind of a cool way to learn about debugging and user experience in applications and the problems that they might have. and helping people overcome those problems and doing some troubleshooting and escalating issues when we couldn't solve them. Did that for about 7 or 8 months. It was a really cool job, but as I was internal, now I could start seeing all these other jobs being that are only shown to internal people of the government. And I found a job that was far more relevant and related to my master's degree in water resources management. I did this job for a couple of years, and then I moved to a senior role where I was managing a staff of about 5 to 8 people and co-leading a team of about 17 to 20 staff. And this was a very contentious kind of public-facing role where we were issuing permits for water. So people who wanted to use water, they had to apply to the government, and we would review those and say yes or no. So as you can imagine, it could be a very contentious topic, and I was the person standing up in front of rooms of 40 or 50 people who were very unhappy, explaining our process, answering questions, facilitating those kinds of complex dialogues, and also making complex technical decisions, but again, nothing to do with software development or anything like that. It was a pretty cool job, but being in government, I just felt like things were inefficient, lots of red tape. There were at least a third of the workforce were just showing up for the paycheck and really not in it whatsoever. And it brings morale down. You can't manage poor performers, people who are toxic to the environment. You can't get rid of them. Lots of problems in government, and I just felt underleveraged and I needed to change. Now, my whole time at government, I've always been, and before, I've been really interested in tech and really interested in entrepreneurship. I'd started a couple small businesses during this time. One was a Canadian tea brand, which did really well for a couple of years. I started that business with my brother. We ran it for 2 years, then we sold it. And then I started a second business with my wife just very quickly, shooting from the hip. It was a local pet service business, and that did really well. Lots of growth. Ran it for 6 months, employed somebody, and sold the business to them. So I'd always been kind of this grinding away in the back of my mind of how to satisfy this kind of entrepreneurial, creative itch that I had while working in a very vanilla, boring government environment. But again, I'd had enough. So I wanted to try and find... I'd always been thinking, how am I going to get out of this? I can't do this forever. This is not me. This is not my identity. I don't feel like I belong here. I need to do something that's more kind of cutting edge, exciting, and more challenging. I think more challenging. I'd always thought about web development. I had a good friend, or have a good friend, who's a Ruby on Rails developer, and at the time he kept telling me, try out Ruby on Rails, just try it. You never know, you might like it. And he was always getting these really high-paying jobs and living in all these different countries, and it looked really cool. And I was always like, no, it's not for me. It's too late. But you know what? Eventually, the bug bit me, and I was the curiosity. I was like, I've got to try this. And he sent me a couple of resources. I think he was using Free Code Camp, but I ended up on finding the Odin project. So that was in December of 2021. Now, at this time, I was still working in government, and I remained working in government until the end of February of 2022. And at that time, my son was born, and I was like, hey, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take paternity leave. So I can actually take leave, receive some pay, and at the same time, learn web development, see what it's all about. Is this something I'm interested in? Can I do it? Am I able to do it? Can I find a job in it? So I had a window of 12 months to test this assumption out that I could and would succeed. And not everybody has that opportunity, but if you can make it work like that for you, I'd highly suggest it. But you don't have to also have this opportunity. There are other ways to do this. You can work full time and study after hours, weekends. You just got to grind, right? It is going to be a grind if you don't have that luxury. Okay, so in this time, started studying December 2021. Then I finished foundations. I was still doing foundations. I started JavaScript on, I remember this date for some reason, January 4th of 2022. This was when I first started learning a programming language of JavaScript, and that date's etched in my mind. And I think it took me another few weeks to finish foundations, and I started the Ruby path. And I think the Ruby path, I skipped a couple lessons, and I do have videos on that, but I skipped Knights Travails, Connect 4, and Chess, just because I was in a rush and I thought that these lessons were useful but not necessary. My assumptions were correct on that for me, but they're not right for everybody, okay? I had to sort of play catch up after the fact in a few of those areas around object-oriented programming, which projects like chess will really help you get solid foundation on beforehand. But I did Ruby for, I think it was another couple months, 6 weeks around there. And then I started Ruby on Rails. And Ruby on Rails was very different to Ruby. You know, it's a whole framework. You'll get your head around it, start learning things. But I worked on that for a couple months. And then around June of 2022, I started building my final project for Ruby on Rails, which I will discuss in a little more detail at the end of this lesson. Excuse me. But that was a really important project for me. And I think really helped me get my first job. So around July of this year, 2022, I had applied to Shopify as one of their interns. They have a great internship program. But I got so far in, I got to my first technical interview, and then I got an email. And things just started acting a little bit weird. I got a silence from the recruiter. And then eventually, after emailing them a couple times, like, hey, what's going on? Because I got an interview like tomorrow and I've heard nothing. I got an email back saying, hey, we're withdrawing our entire internship program. Sorry, see you later. We'll let you know when we're opening our doors up again. So that was a little devastating to everybody, even people who got offers. I hadn't got an offer at all. I was in the first interview technical assessment stage. But it was a bit of a gut punch. Though somebody that I connected with on LinkedIn tagged me on FreshBooks post saying, hey, Shopify interns, if you're still looking for a job, come and look, for us or with us. And I emailed them. They had an email in that post, and I emailed them saying, hey, here's my resume. I was a Shopify candidate, and I really appreciate the opportunity here. Please take a look and let me know if you're interested. Well, long story short, they're interested. I was offered my internship for FreshBooks in August of 2022. The whole hiring process with FreshBooks was very relaxed. It was just a single interview with a hiring manager. And there was no technical assessment, just a lot of technical questions, kind of around my approach to coding, why I want to work at FreshBooks, some of the problems I've solved and overcome, how I overcame them, the experience I had in debugging, what I thought about pair programming and code review and feedback and how I handle feedback. Lots of really good questions around the whole kind of development workflow in a professional capacity. But I think on the company's side, the reason they didn't need to do technical interviews was because it was only a 4-month internship, and if you sucked, then they could fire you early, or at the end of the 4 months they'd say, okay, thanks, see you later. But I managed to actually continue on at FreshBooks onto a second term. So I worked from September to December 2022, and then I worked from January to April of 2023. And yes, that's kind of the history there. I stayed at FreshBooks for 8 months, 2 cycles of an internship. By the second internship, I was working kind of well beyond the expectations and capacity of an intern. They really wanted to hire me. They were looking for ways to hire me. They'd just gone through a round of layoffs, so they were not in a position to hiring. They were doing a hiring freeze. And that's a whole other story around kind of the morale and sentiment impacts that these layoffs had in the company with managers and developers alike. But it kind of soured my experience a little bit to the point where they offered me a third internship there. I said, no, I'm good, thanks. I don't need to do this. I had the opportunity to go back to my government job, which I did for 4 weeks. While I was there, it felt very strange going back to a job when my head was in the coding space, and I'd just reached exit velocity, and I left orbit, but then I was coming back in, and I was just like, no, I've got to get out of here. So I had every ounce of my being focused on getting back out of government, because I'd just gotten so far and succeeded. And it was not an easy decision to go back, but finances and stability was among the criteria with the family, etc. But while I was there, I did find another job through LinkedIn, and that's how I became a Ruby on Rails developer. So I somehow connected with the founder of this company, who's a Rails dev, I don't remember how, but I just made a post on LinkedIn saying, hey, left FreshBooks, really looking for a job in Rails. If anyone has any ideas, let me know. He commented on my post and said, hey, yeah, we're looking for someone. Here's the job posting. I applied. Next day I had an interview with him, and that went really well. Then I had a technical assessment, which was really tough, and I spent quite a bit of time on. I was even surprised at how tough it was or how extensive it was. But I'm really glad that I put the time in and made that work. The technical assessment went well. I got a kind of a personality assessment that I had to do. And then before jumping in, I asked if I could meet the team. Because I wasn't sure, it was a big thing to leave this stable government job. I just didn't want to jump into a really bad situation because you have no idea what small companies are like. And I've dodged a couple of those bullets in other interviews with small companies that are running out of runway and it's a stressful environment. So I asked, provide me some assurance here. Can I, how can I know that this is a good environment? He's like, join our stand-up tomorrow and you'll get to meet the team and be, judged for yourself, which I really appreciated. So I joined the stand-up, got to meet everyone, and I wasn't hired at this point. I was just kind of curious. And the morale was really good. People were really relaxed and communicated well. So that was enough to tell me, okay, this is a good environment to step into. I'm gonna make that leap. And the rest is history. I now work there, and I've been there for it says September of 2022. That's definitely the wrong date. It was actually, I should have changed that. It was June of 2023 was when I got hired there. So I'm closing in on 10 months. It will soon be my 1 year anniversary at this job, and I'm really enjoying it. Okay, so that's kind of a long-winded history as to how I became a Ruby on Rails developer. And one of the things that I really want to focus on at the end here is this pet rescue project that I started as my final Rails project. Now, everybody builds, or everybody follows the curriculum in the Odin project, builds a clone of Facebook for their final project in Ruby on Rails, which is a good CRUD-based app. However, I wanted to build something real. My Ruby on Rails developer friend was telling me, build something relevant and real, okay? And use that as a way to showcase your skills. So that's when I started building my pet rescue app. And that was to help the organization where I adopted my dog from. And they needed a website because their website really wasn't that great. So I built them a small application that would help them manage their pets and receive adoption applications on their pets. Really simple. It's still going now. It has over 200 users and almost 100 adoptions processed through it. But this paved the way for so much for me in this project. It's what got me my internship at FreshBooks because I was building a real world project at the time. I was passionate about it. I had a ton to say. It provided a lot of examples to the questions I was asked in that interview. And I loved talking about it because I cared about the project. And the project went live and has been running for the last year. And it got picked up by Ruby for Good as their new pet rescue application project, rather. And I'm one of the leads on that team. So we're now building more features, and it's now multi-tenanted. So any small pet adoption rescue organization around the world can set up on this application and have their own website where they can manage their pets, the information around the pets, and manage any staff, helpers, receive applications from adopters, and work with fosters on pets. So it's really building something into software here that's going to help a lot of other people. And we've had over 40 contributors on this project so far. Lots of really great people are working on it. And essentially now I'm a lead of an open source project that has a lot of potential to do good in the world in an area that I care about. And that all just started with an idea at the end of the Ruby on Rails path. Okay, so the reason I'm telling you this is because I think right now, the way tech is and the industry is, you need to stand out in order to get hired. I stood out because I built a real production application that has real world users that I was passionate about. It was not a really complex problem to solve, although it was not easy. It's a simple CRUD app at the end of the day, but I had to fit it around a real world situation with real world users and a stakeholder. Okay, and being able to do that is going to set you apart from 99% of other people out there who just build another Facebook clone. So if there's anything you take away from this, is really think about how you're going to stand out if you want to get a job in tech. Okay, this is turning into a very long video, but hopefully that gives you some insight, and hopefully you're still here and not falling asleep. Do you have any questions about my path or anything that you've heard here? I'd love to hear from you down below in the comments, or if you've been through it yourself and have some experience to share, please do throw it down there as well. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, have a good one, and we will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.